Hey everyone, Xerath here, and today we're going to be talking about Ludens versus Malignance. Now, right out of the gate, I'm going to tell you that I am firmly in Camp Ludens. I think it is by far the better item, and I'm going to talk about why that is, but first of all, I want to get into the patch that's coming up. I want to address that a tiny bit. So, we're not going to go too into depth on this, but there is going to be a patch that's going to buff Ludens. And personally, I feel that even without the patch, so in the current state of the game, the Ludens item is just way better for Xerath than Malignance. And you can assume that after the patch, the Ludens item will be even better. Now, how better it's going to be, we're not exactly sure because we don't have the final values. I'll probably do a separate video on that buff as it pertains to Xerath. But for now, just think about this as like a macro discussion between the two items. And I think that's kind of appropriate because, to be honest, I don't really know that the patch and the buffing of Ludens is going to change the mind of people who currently build Malignance. Because really, it's not about the damage differential between the two items or anything. It's more like philosophical differences, I think, is why people tend to build Malignance over Ludens. So let's kind of get into that. Like, why do they build Malignance, right? It's basically for the alt CD. It's not really because it's cheaper, because it's not really that much cheaper, right? And you still lose some AP, so it's not like you're strictly better AP-wise, right? In terms of a cost-to-AP ratio, you are giving up some AP for the cheaper item. And then the alt burn damage and the magic penetration, it's kind of like very situational, right? It's hard to guarantee that people are going to take a lot of taking damage from that. So I think mostly we can agree that people are building it for the alt haste, right? So what I kind of want to do in this video is investigate that and see how much haste are we actually getting, and will that be significant, are kind of like the questions that we want to answer. So to do that, I've set up a particular build here, and this is done intentionally because this build has no additional CDR. And something else I want to talk about when we're doing comparisons like this is I really just want to compare the two items, right? People say all this stuff about, well, if you stack Malignance with ability haste and then you stack it with Ultimate Hunter, that's where the difference lies. And that is kind of bullshit, to be honest, because the problem is that the more ability haste you stack, actually, the worse it gets. So we're giving like the most charitable possible look into Malignance right here, right? We're saying, like, what is it going to give us when we have no ability haste? And then we can kind of base our calculations off from there. And we're going to do a couple different builds to show an ability haste one and a non-ability haste one. So this is the first one. And as you can see, we have like 98 seconds on the alt, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to replace Ludens Companion here with Malignance. We have no other CDR from runes or anything like that, as you can see. So when you replace it with Malignance, you get 85 seconds. So this is basically like a 13-second difference in the ultimate, and this is going to be, like I said, is the worst case scenario, the highest differential you're going to see between the alt on a Malignance build and a non-Malignance build, right? And then we're going to go and we're going to look at the difference with a more of a CDR build, right? So we're going to sell this, we're going to get Crypt Bloom, and we're going to do Horizon Focus, because this is a pretty common build. Okay, so in this particular case, it's 69 seconds, basically, right? And then when we swap out the Malignance for Ludens, in this case, it's 77. So in this case, we're getting like an 8-second differential. Okay, so there's like a 5-second differential between those two item sets, okay, at level 6. And most people are probably more comfortable building into this setup, right? Because they like the additional ability haste. And if you're doing that, remember, you're only getting like an 8-second difference, right? Between had you built Ludens Companion and had you built Malignance. And if you add something like Ultimate Hunter into this, keep in mind, it's going to be even smaller, the differential, right? Because you can have more ability haste, you can get more of a diminishing return. So we're going to go to level 11 now, and that's what we're going to do, just to show you what it looks like at level 11. Here, okay, and we are going to, okay, so we're at 68 seconds with this build, with the Ludens Companion, right? And then we're going to sell it, We'll grab Malignance here. And 61 seconds. So basically, 7 seconds between the two items at, doing the ability haste version. And then if we go and do the other version, right, where we sack this, and we go Leandry's, go Void Staff, right? See, we're at 75 seconds, and then when we sell it here, we are at 86 seconds. So it's about an 11-second differential, right? So at level 11, we're talking about like an 8 to 11 second differential, or sorry, a 7 to 11 second differential. And then at level 6, we're talking about like an 8 to 13 second differential between the two item sets. So even taking the absolute worst one, which we'll kind of use that for the purposes, and we'll say it's 13 seconds, right? You can kind of see that that's not really that much of a huge cooldown reduction, right, on the ultimate. And I think the problem is that Xerath is just not really a champion in my eyes where you're going to be attempting to ult anywhere on close to cooldown, right? As a matter of fact, like a lot of the time, even though you are going to be ideally using your ult to initiate fights, you tend not to be the one who decides when that is possible. So you can maybe pick the exact parameter to really kick the fight off by initiating your ult. However, your teammates have to be in position to be able to capitalize on that ultimate, right? If you're just free ultimating people, like you just turret up in mid lane and just start trying to hit people with your ult, once you get to like any reasonable elo, even something like gold and plat as low as they are, people are just going to be able to dodge your ult, especially with all the dashes and movement speed in the game. If they have boots, you're going to do nothing with that ult. So you really do want some type of pressure from other champions adding pressure onto your opponent before you set up and use your ult. So your ult is very dependent on the game state and what your team's doing, stuff like that. So it's just very unlikely that you're going to be able to get a ton more ult per game or anything like that by building Malignance, right? Because you're not limited by the actual ult cooldown, you're limited by the game state and the circumstances and picking an actual good spot to use your ult. And then, you could make the other argument that's like, okay, well, but in some circumstances, right, you are going to have your ult when you wouldn't have it, and, you're going to want to have your ult in those cases, right? Like, let's say you're doing a Ludens companion build, your ult is 11 seconds off cooldown, until it cools down, rather, and you need to use it right then, right? And you're like, god damn, like, I wish I had Malignance for that game. And that is going to happen, there are going to be games like that, but what I want you to keep in mind and think about is, like, how many games is that really going to be the case? And then how many games did you need to use your ult right then? Like, where if you did ult, like, 10 seconds later, would it have been a tragedy in that game? There's some games that it might have been, but I think many games you could have also waited the 10 seconds or whatever, especially because you can communicate your ult, whether it's ready, just spend this really quick, right? You can just easily ping it, and people can see when your ult is up, right? And the one ping that I think people do tend to listen to is when people's ultimates are up. People tend to like to make plays around them. So if you ping that you have 10 seconds left on your ult, it's probably not a situation where it's like, oh damn, I needed Malignance there, to be able to use it right then, because maybe your jungler just doesn't int 10 seconds earlier, so it's just a very, very small amount you're gaining on the ult, keep in mind. And what are you losing is the real big question, right? So let's do that, actually. That's like the more interesting thing, I think, right? So we have a max level Q here, and we have a combat dummy that has 40 MR and about 2k health, right? So it could be a little bit less health, but we'll shoot a Q in here, and we'll see. So 778, right? And we're going to come back, and we're going to swap out this for Malignance. And we'll do the more traditional build as well. 778, keep in mind. And then 607. So basically 171, damage differential, give or take. And that's pretty huge on a Q. Now, that's not going to be on every Q, but I'm going to talk about the game state stuff in a little bit. But first, I just want to, we'll do the calculation with the more traditional items, right? That way, people that use these items feel a bit more comfortable. Come back over here, wait for the shot charge to get to 6, and send it. Okay, so 679. Then we're gonna come back over here. We're gonna sell this, grab Malignance, wait for our first strike to be up. This actually is this is on the reveal. It's not on the actual damage proc, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm just gonna let it tick down for purposes of the video, so people don't get confused. Okay, 679 and 502, right? So clearly, like, we're keeping in that about 170 damage-ish range, right? Which is, it's huge. And you might be thinking, well, that's not on every shot, you know, because if we go back and we replace this, right, and we pull out the gun again, the companion, you know, let's say that this was already fully stacked, right, and I shoot it into this. So now we're at 0 stacks. By the time my Q comes back, we're already at like 1 or 2 stacks, right? So you're thinking like, well, yeah, you're not even getting that full damage every time, you know? And that's true. If you're rapid firing out Qs, you're not going to benefit from the Ludens damage all the time. However, I would say that there's not a ton of cases where you're really going to be able to do that. It's mostly when you're sieging, right? So I will grant you that when you're sieging something, you're going to be able to just kind of vomit out the Qs, and you're going to have like a bunch of live targets ready to be hit. So that's one case where, you know, you're not really going to have that Ludens damage up for every Q. However, when you're just kind of like roaming around in the mid game and you're trying to create chaos, you know, trying to chunk people out before objectives and stuff like that, I think the application of having the Ludens, you know, it's applied much better there, because what happens is if I'm sitting in this bush and I Q somebody, like let's say there's an 80 carry trying to farm mid, I Q him and I deal a decent chunk of his life. He is running away, you know, in any reasonable high level game, right? Maybe in like bronze or silver, he's sticking around to eat 3 or 4 more Qs, but as soon as you get to like even, I would say, gold or plat, right, and definitely above that, these players, they're not going to sit around and just let you have a shooting gallery on them, right? They're going to try and play further back, trying to bait you on your side of the map where you're more vulnerable. So by the time you actually get another opportunity to Q somebody again, it's probably going to be around 12 seconds, you know, and you're going to have your shot charge back up. So I think the mid-game harass, like the poking down the mid-game, that really does lean into Ludens. One of the things I've actually heard talk about is that, you know, one of the reasons, like, oh, you can build Ludens in, like, low ELO because you need to carry, right? But then you build Malignance in high ELO because at that point you're there about facilitating your team and poking. But it's like, when you actually break that claim down, it doesn't really make sense because you do much better poke with Ludens Companion. Much better consistent poke, you know? You're not using your ult to poke. So you do like better poke, and you're pretty much maximizing the damage in the circumstances where you can poke, because like I said, you're not going to be able to poke 24/7 in a high level game. Most likely people are just not going to put their body in front of you enough, you know. And when you can poke, you're kind of maximizing the damage. 170 damage on a target that has, like, if it's a squishy target, maybe in the mid game, like 1700 1800 HP, like that's huge on like an 80 carry or something. You hit multiple of those, right? That's like all of a sudden we're 320 extra damage down. I mean, to me, that's like a lot more impactful than, you know, oh, maybe this 7-8 seconds, you know, probably 11 seconds at worst, is gonna be the difference maker here, where maybe if I find that niche scenario where I really need to use my ult here, you know, maybe that turns the game around. That's gonna be super rare. It's much more consistent to just get the extra damage on the Q, get more damage down before fights, right? And there's also kind of like, I feel like the psychological aspect where just seeing more of their health drop can change how they react to you in the game and kind of like what they're doing. And it's not necessarily a huge difference, but sometimes every little bit counts, right? Sometimes people are not as afraid of you if you really can't like chunk them out, and they're not thinking in their mind after they get hit by that Q, okay, his Ludens is down for like 6 seconds. You know, they just know, oh wow, I got hit by that Q and it really hurt. That's basically what they're thinking, right? So yeah, I think pretty much every way you cut this, Ludens is better, and it's absolutely going to be better after the patch. So yeah, if you guys like this and you found it helpful, please give a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back with another video soon. See ya.